Tuesday night. I got my laptop on and I feel alright. I got a few joints to roll and my munch is made. I got my headphones on and I'm closing the door, don't disturb me. It's time to stand up tall and say some things about the shitty world that we're living in. The boys at Raconteurs News. I say Raconteurs, Raconteurs, say Raconteurs, Raconteurs. I said Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News. Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News, oh yeah.
Good evening and welcome to Raconteurs News. It is Monday. It's Monday the, 19th December 2000, and I think we've got a week left till Christmas, so that'd make it 18th, wouldn't it? So yeah, it's the 18th of December 2017. Thanks for joining me. I hope you're all very well. And had a great weekend. The big C word is upon us. I know this is a difficult time of year for a lot of people. So what I imagine... I just hope that whatever your circumstances, you're making the best of everything that you're getting. So we've got a great show lined up for you tonight. We've got a super show lined up for you tonight. I've got... Oh, by the way, I just wanted to do the usual Raconteurs News intro. This is Jason Holmes reminding you that this world belongs to Aid Hardy and not any fucker else, so you can piss off. This evening, I'm joined by none other than the what should we call him? The elusive Aid Hardy. He's done a few shows on Raconteurs News and Raconteurs 2, but he's had a bit of time off. And he's back with me in the saddle, sat at the side of me. Evening, Aid, how are you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Oh, I'm spot on, as you know. I'm spot on. I am now, anyway.
Can I just say that this world belongs to all of us, not just me?
Are you sure? Is that what you're doing now? You're relinquishing all your rights as owner of the world, and giving up on it. Do that. So, have you been on a bit of a spiritual journey? Have you been on a bit of a... Has things been going on? What's been going on with you?
I think one reason why I wanted to come on tonight was just to explain to people that I've not sort of jumped ship, and that my feelings, they're evolving all the time, evolving and revolving, but I'm still of a similar mindset as to what I was before. It's just that, when you say, are you all right? When... you first sort of get in the mindset that us and hopefully everybody listening is in. The truth can set you free, but firstly, it'll really piss you off. I think I'd got to the stage where I was continually in a negative frame of mind.
Right.
Which obviously is not good, because in order to help myself or help other people, it's got to be a positive state of mind. And the whole reason for me doing any of this was to be positive about it.
Yeah.
Not just say, what's wrong with the world, we can't do anything about it. Well, we can, and I've got the answer. And it's no biggie, but it's dead simple, and we'll cover that later. But I just found myself in a constant sort of negative state. And it was making me ill. And I could see it coming, and I thought, I don't want that again. Which is why I sort of backed off. But it hasn't stopped me researching stuff. It hasn't stopped me feeling sick through to my bones that, the 1% of the 1% keep treading on us and keep doing all that. And I'll always do my best to help anybody I can. Speaking of which, we've got another guest tonight, haven't we?
We have, yes. If people remember from last year, we did a We did a mental health special, and if you've not heard that, I suggest you go back through the archives and find that mental health special. AD, why don't you give us an introduction, because you probably obviously need the practice now that you've not been doing it for a few weeks.
Yeah. About towards the end of November last year, so about 13 months ago now, my phone rang, and it was a dear friend called Daisy, and she rang me and said, my car's parked on, and bearing in mind I'd not spoken to her for about 4 or 5 months, my car's parked on the street. I've come for a meeting with the mental health team in South Yorkshire, and they've kept me and they've sectioned me. I can't get out to my car. All my clothes and everything's in my car, because at the time she'd been made homeless because she was an NHS whistleblower and lost a house, yada, yada, yada. And from there started basically 4 weeks of absolute hell for her, being incarcerated. And I would say it's almost a year to the day since she was released, which was no mean feat. And there was myself and you and her brother and countless other people involved in that. And a lot of people have been asking for an update. So I can't see her on the screen. I'm just hoping she's actually there and can hear us. Daisy, are you with us?
I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, but we can't see you. We can hear you.
Well, I'm on my screen at this end, so it must have frozen at yours, but I can hear you loud and clear.
That's fine. The one big thing that people will be wanting to ask Daisy is, how are you?
It's been a bit of a roller coaster of a year of recovery and trying to move forward with my life, but as you know, it's had its ups and downs. I think it was the 20th I was released last year, so it's a couple of days to go. But what I thought might be helpful for people who are sort of involved with mental health services or even never even heard of the sort of processes people go through, might just sort of give a few pointers to information that might help people who are in the same situation as me in the past, or potentially are facing that and haven't got a clue what their rights are or how to safeguard themselves as much as possible.
That's brilliant. If we can come to that in a bit. Firstly, what I'd love you to do is the program that we did about a year ago. Can you sort of put that in a concise couple of minutes and just explain to people how it come to happen and then what happened and how we come to sort of 12 months ago?
And sorry, Daisy, just explain to people what it was you did, your profession, and how things went tits up, so to speak. Sorry about my language.
That's a very technical term, Jason.
No, it's fine. It's funny. It's quite strange, really, to think that we actually did a radio show during that time, and to think, crikey, a year's gone past. But basically what it was I'd been in the NHS for 17 years, blew the whistle in November 2010, and ended up being held on suspension for over 3.5 years, which is extremely isolating. The NHS is quite notorious for a process, a typical modus operandi of character assassination, both personally and professionally, to break any causal link to detriment that you may be suffering as a result of blowing the whistle. It's very common. It happens to hundreds of us in the health service. Towards the 4th year, I ended up becoming very unwell as a result of information that came into my possession that showed the tactics that they go to gain people's suspensions when they have blown the whistle. And one of those tactics, which made me very unwell, was the discovery of fraudulent mental health information that was written about me.
Can I just point something out there?
Yep.
Your profession in the NHS involved you having a scalpel in your hand and cutting people open.
Yes, it did.
So they effectively made up a mental health history for you.
Yes.
And my question has always been, if that was the case, why did they continue to let you into an operating theatre with a scalpel in your hand?
Well, at the time,
we know it's fraudulent.
Yes, I mean, I worked for two trusts at the time. One trust was targeting me because I blew the whistle. The other trust at the time was quite happy for me to continue working with no problems whatsoever. 3.5 years of isolation resulted in me going off sick with the other trust simply because I couldn't cope with the pressure and I wasn't safe to practice in the other hospital. So I removed myself, rightly so, from that circumstance. But it was the discovery of information, whether or not the trust actually gave me that deliberately to crack me mentally, or whether it was given accidentally, I still don't know to this day. But the information was used to character assassinate me with regards to senior managers of the trust and with HR. And it was used as part reason to gain my suspension, of which I was suspended for over 3.5 years, and it would have continued had I not had a mental health breakdown and literally told them to stuff it and walked away. I was that ill. I literally just walked away from my house, my career, everything. And it was a result of that that I recognised I did need mental health support. And despite it having been used fraudulently by the trust against me to start with, I did engage with mental health services of another trust. And unfortunately, as a result of that process, some staff were excellent, were really understanding of the difficulties of NHS whistleblowers and the mental injuries they suffer as a result of serial abuse protracted over a long period of time, which causes PTSD. And along with PTSD, it can cause moderate to severe depression and other different sorts of mental health issues associated with that. And it was back in 2014, Aid, when I rang you up to say they are trying to section me.
Yeah, I remember it well. I was sat in exactly the same chair that I'm sat in now, and I'm thinking, what on earth is going on here? But basically what had happened was you recognised that you'd got this PTSD and you were willingly accepting the help of a regular weekly or fortnightly meeting, to do that. And you thought you were going to one of these normal meetings, but that's not what happened. Just tell everybody what happened.
So they attempted a Mental Health Act assessment with view to detaining me under Section 2 back in the end of 2014. I successfully avoided that, and I'll go into how I achieved that. And then 2 years down the line, having lost my home and living out my car, I'll be honest, for a year, which is not something that I particularly am proud of, but it's what happens as part of the mental health anguish and grieving process of having lost your career for doing something which is right, which is raising workplace concerns in the interest of the public. In 2016, I ended up being sectioned successfully, which is when I ended up doing the radio show with you, wasn't it?
Mm.
It was the 6th of December last year that we did the radio show, and you say you got out on the 20th, so it was 2 weeks between. But we did have the tools to be able to crack you out, didn't we? It was just that you perhaps weren't quite ready for taking control.
At that point, I don't have particularly any qualms is not the right word to use, but at that point last year, when you realise that once you've dedicated your life to a profession and a national public body institution that the public have great respect for, little do they know actually what sits under the tip of the iceberg with regards to the denigration of different types of health professionals across the NHS when they raise workplace concerns. It's a horrific problem with the NHS. It doesn't matter what policy that they introduce to the public as a propaganda tool. The tricks of the trade regards character assassination, breaking causal link between you raising concerns and them getting rid of you through fraudulent disciplinary processes and suspension still goes on. I've been in touch with lots of people over this and have helped a couple of people regards the same situation. And I've had a great person who helped me, who was in the NHS, who suffered the same horrific processes. So nothing changes in the NHS. It boils down to financial safeguarding. It's not in the interests of the public at all, regards the original issue that's raised as a workplace concern under whistleblowing. It's all about damage limitation financially, and each trust safeguarding their reputation, and the Treasury under the government providing endless pots of money to defend the trust should any case go to an employment tribunal. And that in itself is
just on that note, Daisy, you I do remember on one of your legal battles there was little old you, and the barrister you were up against was
Seamus Sweeney, the top employment barrister that worked for Alan Sugar. So, having got rid of and sacking all my union reps who one worked very, very proactively with me and categorically stated I had a case of whistleblowing detriment, was very soon removed after he made that statement to the trust, suddenly developing a bad back, and then was replaced by a higher union rep who did his utmost to desecrate my case as much as possible, with threats as well, because I'd exposed an association with Common Purpose who was involved with blocking my my case. And there's 4 people, senior people within the trusts that were involved with CP links, and it was those 4 that were well protected, ring fenced, and did their utmost to keep me on suspension until I broke. And that's their practice is under the legal system. You're not subject to any detriment under the eyes of the legal system if you're on suspension and receiving a salary. So they can keep you at home for years and years. And after 3.5 years, and the discovery of information that was fraudulent that was used to gain my suspension, it broke me. Had I not received that, I would have probably carried on fighting and probably would still be on suspension to this very day. So the tactics are not to be underestimated, and you only have to go and look on websites of whistleblowers in the NHS, and there's quite a number online, to hear their horrific stories and what we're fighting for to put changes in place to block the loopholes of internal processes that are used to hang, drawn and quarter very good professionals.
Can I just interject there, please, Daisy? I just want to tell people we are on Facebook Live. So if you're on my Facebook page, this is going live. You can see me. No, don't worry, nobody can see you or anything else, or anybody else. They can see me sat talking to you. And there's somebody watching now. The amazing thing about that is the last time I saw this guy in the flesh, I've seen him obviously online, but the last time I saw this guy is when we came to visit you in that institution, and we were. What do you remember, Adi? I think it were pissing it down, and we were walking across that big garden thing. We got into the hallway, and there was that lad there who stopped and talked to me. He's called Adrian. He's called Adrian Wild. So he works in NHS. I think he works in mental health services as well, but he's listening tonight. I've just spotted him on Facebook Live. So hello to everybody who's watching on Facebook Live. You can see me on there, but you can also get us on Spreaker.com/Raconteurs News, RaconteursNews.com. Well, you can find us on YouTube and everything. So I just wanted to interject. I just wanted to give that little bit of information. So I'll hand over to you, Adi. Go on.
Yeah, so here we are, Daisy. You were in a position where you actually wanted the help of the mental health system for your PTSD.
Yes.
Even while you were incarcerated, you wanted that.
Yes.
But what you didn't want was to be incarcerated, and they were basically incarcerating you for a completely different reason. So when we were looking at ways to get you out of there, even though we'd got it buttoned and nailed legally and lawfully, with the help of a social worker, who shall remain nameless but was an awful lot of help, we'd got your brother in the position of nearest relative. Mm-hmm. We'd done everything, put everything in place. But you yourself, at one point, said, hang on a minute, I don't want to lose the help of sort of the mental health unit moving forward on kind of an outpatient basis. But you were actually incarcerated for the other reason. So you were in quite a catch-22 position at one point.
It was, and it boils down to basically, I initially had an extremely good psychiatrist who was very understanding, had very broad avenues of perspective, shall we say, was very knowledgeable in helping and supporting with PTSD management, because it is an injury. It is not a mental health disorder. It's an injury as a result of continued trauma. And unfortunately, there was one particular psychiatrist that I ended up under, and he had a very narrow remit of considerations. As we know, psychiatrists work to their own Bible of what a mental disorder consists of, diagnosing it and following a strict regime of basically outpatient management. And if they then wish to invoke a Mental Health Act assessment and the process that follows with it, they have the full power of the legal system to do that. Unfortunately, when we know, as many of your listeners do know, the difference between legal and law, and you start asserting your authority under common law and making it clear to them that they don't have the jurisdiction under the legal system without our consent, and trying to explain what the differences are, etc., that fell very much on deaf ears. They actually used that against me. That's one of the reasons.
I do remember one meeting that we went into, and you were on God knows what drugs they were filling you full of. I think the technical term is you were off your tits. You were so many drugs. I'd lost count. And they basically said to you, you can either take these tablets, or we can inject you. It's up to you. So they made it very clear from day one, you either did it or they'll make you do it.
Well, one of the purposes of the Mental Health Act is if the AMP, which is an approved mental health professional who's responsible for carrying out the mental health assessment, and it only can do so, well, in my case, with the recommendation of a psychiatrist and an S12 doctor, a Section 12 doctor, the admission gives them legal custody to force me into a secure unit and undergo a period of assessment, plus or minus the administration of drugs. I can tell you from my experience of being an inpatient detained against my will.
Prisoner.
Yeah, it's
a locked door and an 18-foot fence with a roll of barbed wire at the top of it. Yeah, it's not a hospital ward.
No, it's basically they class it as a hospital for care and treatment. It's not. It's an opportunity to then force administer medication. Regards care and any other form of activity to help you with your circumstances is window dressing. You get the occasional occupational health craft session, which I didn't enjoy, but complied to tick the boxes. Say no more on that.
I do remember one meeting that we went to, and they were trying to gain authority over you. And even though you were full of drugs, you absolutely nailed the common law. You nailed it.
But they don't understand it. The psychiatrist...
Well, I remember what she said to you, and she said, "Oh, yes, but let's just set this aside."
And also,
having very, very strong words. Let's just set this aside. Which is a legal and lawful term, but it was just a case of it doesn't fit in their box. They can't work with it. It does give you power, but they're going to ignore it.
What's interesting is since then I've had a long battle in gaining all my records, which I'll talk about in a minute. But with regards to me trying to assert common law and getting to them to understand that they didn't have the jurisdiction under me, and trying to explain to them admiralty and merchant law, laws of water as we know, and the difference between that and common law. It's actually in my records as part of my delusions, etc., were water. And it actually makes reference to one of the nurses saying to the psychiatrist, "Oh, there was a documentary on a couple of weeks ago about water. We think Rebecca's been obsessing about that," or words to that effect. which
Like they think you just watch normal TV. Great.
Yeah,
So,
they think Daisy's been obsessed with that. You mean?
yeah, it was part of my delusions and part of my apparent psychosis that required medication. Now, the interesting thing is, Section 2 is 28 days. 28 days is 4 weeks, and that gives them 4 weeks worth of opportunity to get you on antipsychotics and for them to take effect. So it's not 28 days of care and support. It's 28 days of drugs, and you only see the psychiatrist once a week, and basically they get feedback off the ward staff as to how you've been, and they'll say, oh, we'll see you next week, you're still on them. So, under Section 2, I didn't start to get Section 17 leave for almost 3 weeks, and that allowed me off ward to do a baking session where they would assess me whether I could make beans on toast or make a cake.
But because they were short of staff, who was the one who had to take you out the ward?
It was yourself, wasn't it?
Yeah, because they didn't have the staff to even be able to walk you down to the local shop as part of your integration back into society.
Part of Section 17.
They didn't even have the staff to do that.
No, that is a common problem, unfortunately, from hearing from other people, is that Section 17 leave isn't openly, well, not often, disclosed sufficiently to patients to let them know what their legal rights are for Section 17 leave, how much they can have while they're an inpatient, and also whether they've got the staff on the ward to actually accompany you off-site and return you on-site. So it sometimes can be poorly communicated for reasons which I think benefit them as opposed to inpatients.
There was two things I just wanted to take out of what you just said there, Daisy. The drugs that they administered, when there are serious side effects, I mean, I remember you and I sitting in A&E for 8 hours. Now, you were technically an inpatient in a hospital, and when you were sat there with basically the symptoms of Parkinson's disease caused by the drugs, their answer was they give you more drugs to supposedly deal with the side effects of the first ones, and then when they cause you side effects, give you more drugs to counteract the side effects of the second lot of drugs. And then when they didn't have the staff to deal with it, it was me and you that had to go and sit in A&E.
The antipsychotic medication, unfortunately, these types of drugs, which are horrific, do have serious side effects, and they're not side effects, as we know. They are effects.
They're effects. Yeah, absolutely right.
And they are torturous. And as a result of me suffering those, they put me on other drugs to combat that. And what, like you say correctly, one of the side effects was pseudo-Parkinsonism. And the drugs to combat that caused me mental thought block where I couldn't speak, I couldn't think, amongst other symptoms. And it was fortunately me being able to, whilst out on Section 17 leave, I think, or I can't remember the exact circumstances. I think I was going for an eye test because I was having so much eye pain from the drugs.
That's right,
that
yeah.
Got an A&E consultant to actually say you need to come off these. The ward staff are very numb to inpatients having side effects. Effects, and blaming them on a side effect, and you'll tolerate them, you'll get used to them. And personally, from my experience, they don't really care about it. It's part of their role just to make sure you take your meds and don't secrete them, i.e. don't put them under your tongue and get rid of them. Any suggestion of non-compliance with oral medication is counteracted with the threat of you will have them injected. Unfortunately, under the Mental Health Act, part of the Act removes your right to consent to medication. So, like I said, a Mental Health Act assessment where you are detained is supposed to be for a period of assessment plus or minus drug treatment. That assessment is literally a day or so, and then they're wanting to fill you full of drugs. So, to me, it is not about care and treatment without drugs. It's just a legal opportunity to force you to take them. And it was the fear of being restrained and having something injected into me that made me comply with oral medication. And I think that's a horrific situation for a lot of people to be in. And I understand as well that this Mental Health Act review that's Theresa May, that's requested in October, is going to be looking at part of this very issue. So I shall be submitting my little bit towards that. I think a lot of other people will be too.
So,
Jason,
would you say that when they took you in, rather than treat you for the condition that they claimed that you had, they just basically medicated you up and sent you further and further into this mental whirlwind that was going on because of the circumstances that you'd found yourself under? But this whirlwind, it seemed that they were trying to drag you in with these medications rather than treat you.
It's just a legal opportunity to force medicate, from my experience, and also from a lot of other people's as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some people that find them beneficial and may or may not have side effects, but a lot of people do. They are terrifying, and the literature that they give you is very minimal. I had to fight to get all the literature on the drugs. The staff weren't forthcoming in giving me that in any shape or form. I come from an NHS background, know the risks with drug side effects, and to me, I felt as if I was being they were looking at me as being unreasonable in wanting to have all the literature on the drugs they were giving me, and also check the drugs that they were giving me.
I remember you asking for the, I can't remember what they called, the spec sheets on the drugs.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you asked for, have they got a copy of the Mental Health Act?
Yeah, yeah.
And their answer was, we haven't got one on the unit, but we can get one in a few days.
Yeah, I was asking for the Mental Health Act legislation and also the Mental Health Act. They gave me the Code of Practice as well, which is a very thick manual, and that's something that I want to sort of go on and just mention to sort of help other people who may or may not, find themselves potentially under the risk of section or actually section themselves.
Just before you go there, Daisy, can I just bring in one other point?
Yep.
I distinctly remember when you were in that place. In a way, I could feel for the staff, because they were even telling us that the resources they used to have, like they had a caravan on the coast they could take people to. Yeah. They used to have a minibus where they could take them bowling and swimming and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And they'd got an amount of money which was set aside for the, let's call it, normal life. Keep, let's call them patients or inmates, in some kind of normal frame of mind. Mm. But the only thing that I saw was 3 times a day the shutter went up on the kitchenette, and it was like Pavlov's dogs waiting for a cup of tea, lunch, or their tea.
And that's unfortunately the case. They had a lot of funding cuts, and that's national. So the provisions to inpatients is very limited. The side effects of the drugs make your appetite very increased, and you eat. You're not necessarily hungry from natural hunger. It's the side effects of the drugs. So you're mentally distressed. You're incarcerated with lots of other people. You're not aware of the system, the process, the situation, how things run with staff. It's a huge stress on your psyche to cope with that, let alone deal with your issues as to why you're in there. And then on top of that, drugs are making you eat, and you're queuing up, itching to get to the shutter on an automated robotic process of stuff in your face. Yeah. So
rock with the munchies rocking from one foot to the other. Yeah. The other thing as well, and I know Jason wants to get in on this. During your 4 weeks there, it was 28 days.
Yeah.
However, you putting in an appeal against things, they had, was it 40 days in which they could reply to you?
No, what it was is you're allowed to apply to an appeal tribunal when you're an inpatient, But I couldn't face that at that point simply because of the employment tribunal process that I'd been through and almost completed, but because of my breakdown, didn't end up completing. And psychologically, it was a huge trigger to even sit in front of an employment tribunal, a mental health tribunal. You know, if I'd have presented my case, it'll have been the same old block as what psychiatry gave me with regards to completely not understanding legal and law. And it was going to be a waste of time. So I just safeguarded myself and declined that option at that point.
The other thing as well that I remember is your section was supposedly for 28 days. But as we were sort of having those meetings weekly, and I was sat there talking to the staff, and the staff were really good at managing to eavesdrop on any conversation that we had. And I remember a few times they asked you who I was, and they were always extremely nice to me. But the 28-day thing, it was almost like in their heads it didn't exist. It was like, well, what do you mean you think you might be getting out after 28 days? Well, we're going to keep you because we keep everybody, and everybody stays on a voluntary. Well, of course, it's not voluntary, because if you don't stay voluntarily after 4 weeks, they do some other jiggery pokery, fill another form in, and you end up under them for 6 months, which isn't voluntary.
No, I mean, I was under an S2, so I was an involuntary patient, and I was like that for two and a half weeks. It was only because I twigged on very quickly that to get out of there, you can't decline their services, in inverted commas. You've got to be seen to engaging. You've got to tick that box of going to the craft exercises and the group discussion exercises and the bakery exercises. If you don't tick those boxes, you just it's to rob your own back and staying in there longer. You've got to comply with taking the drugs. You've got to put a smile on the face. You've got to make up rubbish conversation with the nurses to be seen to be ticking the boxes to be able to get out. And when you research that online, there's an awful lot of inpatients that say the same thing. You either switch on very quickly to know what you've got to do to get out, or you could end up staying in there a lot longer. I did that. And I'm not ashamed to say I turned around, I lied through my teeth. And like say other people do to get themselves out. So really it proves that I was quite okay. A compos mentis not to have been sectioned in the first place. You know, it reflects on the lack of consideration that staff actually have towards patients. One thing that patients aren't aware of, first off, is that every conversation you have with other patients, with staff, is written up. If you have a one-to-one with a staff member, it gets written up. It's the information that the nursing staff log on their records every day, morning, noon and night.
But we did use that to our advantage at a couple of points, didn't we?
Yeah, it gets reported to the psychiatrist when you get seen by them only once a week, because all they're interested in is whether the drugs are working. Psychiatrists don't get involved with your care on a daily basis at all. And also, if you talk and have any conversations with patients that may be very in-depth, and if you happen to agree with other patients on their views on life, spiritual, scientific, God, you name it, whatever you discuss, if they think they're not reasonable, there will be a note made. So it was something that I learned afterwards, that you be very careful with what you say. Because
I do remember a guy in there, I think his name was John, and he was very aware of what was going on in the world.
Yeah, a lovely patient, and there were some extremely intelligent people in there. And it was quite a delight. I had more therapy from speaking to other inpatients in there than I did with the staff.
How many other people do you know who actually got out after 28 days? Because I remember at the time, even a lot of the staff were amazed that after 28 days you were walking out of the place.
Well, what they said to me was, if you're prepared to stay, if we downgrade you from an involuntary to a voluntary patient, but you're prepared to stay here, then we'll downgrade you. So basically it was saying, yes, I would comply and stay, but it was under threat that if I didn't, I was going to potentially be staying under as an involuntary patient. But you see, the crux of the matter is once you become a voluntary patient, whether you go in as a voluntary or whether you're downgraded to a voluntary later on after a section, it's within your rights to refuse medication. And they didn't particularly like that with me, and were raising concerns of potential relapse and things like that. And basically, I just wanted to get out of there.
I remember the day you're sat there, and there's sort of 4 of them and you basically tore them all apart. Your leaflet says this, your information says that. I'm not taking that, and I'm leaving now with Aid, and I'm going to be staying at his house for 5 days. And they just sat there and kind of went, okay.
Well, you have these multiple disciplinary team meetings once a week where you've got members of the nursing staff present, you've got other people present, you've got the psychiatrist present, and you've got yourself there. And it's supposed to be in your interest to have these group meetings where they assess how you're progressing, or rather complying to their rules and regime, shall we say. But actually for the individual, it's very intimidating. You've got somebody typing away records. You're trying to think on your feet to tick the boxes to get them to think you're improving, and play the system to your advantage. For those that don't, they're in longer. And I would say, and perhaps in hindsight, those that do know how to get out quick are probably never meant to be in there in the first place. Obviously, there are patients that are very ill with different issues, and I'm not saying I wasn't poorly, because I was, but I was refusing to take antipsychotic drugs before my section in 2016, and also in 2014, where they attempted to get me in. But there are other ways of handling people with more intensive treatment than just sectioning them to get them onto drugs to make their psychiatrist's life easier. I
do remember a lot of the comments that we had when we did the programme about a year ago. On that show, there were many comments, and people saying that they couldn't believe from the way you were, how intelligently you were speaking, all the information that you were bringing forward. They couldn't believe how you'd been sectioned, and certainly couldn't believe that you were actually at that point on antipsychotic drugs.
Unfortunately, like we say, psychiatrists have their own Bible. And if you have a spiritual beliefs or experiences or viewpoints or part of your presentation that doesn't comply with what is acceptable in society under psychiatry, then you're fair game. And it's as simple as that. But, psychiatrists need to recognise themselves that they're under a psychosis themselves. Their own belief system is in of itself a psychosis. It's a set of beliefs that they believe are the ones. And, it's part of social engineering. If you don't fit, they'll deal with you this way.
Bex, I keep calling by your surname. Daisy. I just wanted to... We've got a couple of comments from people. Adam Bowden, he's watching on Facebook. How you doing, Adam? I haven't seen you for a long time. I hope to catch up with you very, very soon. But I know Adam's a pretty mainstream guy, and he's only listening to this because it's on Facebook. But he's asked a couple of questions. He's asked... and these are somebody who comes from the mainstream questions, just remember this. But he put, so are we to be suspicious of anything that we're being prescribed by Big Pharma? And also he's just put, he says, is the risk of being in an alien environment, in other words, where you found yourself, is that risk? is it a risk that it's going to make you worse and it's going to be counterproductive and it's going to make you relapse if you're in that situation? What do you think?
Okay. So it's two-pointed question. First part regards Big Pharma. As I've always said, and I think it was Aid yourself, and it was a great way of remembering it. You know, it's called pharmaceutical. You take the P off and it's pharmaceutical. Okay? There's harm within farm. Mm-hmm. And pharmaceutical industry in itself has an agenda. There are good sides to it and there are bad sides to it, like any coin. And the thing is with pharmaceuticals, they're marketed, they're under the legal system jurisdiction, they're drugs that are patented, and when it comes to psychiatry under the Mental Health Act have access to those drugs to force medicate you with them. As we know, for example, like with cannabis is a natural plant put on this earth by God. It is under common law, freely available to every person.
Including Jason.
I'm sorry, I'm just showing Daisy a spliff while she's.
It is under the legal system, as we know, the coppers call it a drug, and that is the only way they can do you under the legal system for being in possession of it. Under common law, if you assert that and say no, it's God's given plant to humanity and the world, as we know, that's the problem we have between common law and legal. It's the same with pharmaceuticals. The pharmaceutical companies create the drugs. They want to market them. They market them under a patent. They make lots of money. They have a propaganda machine to make people believe that this drug is to help with whatever problem. They get you to take them. They have legal excuse from liability with the drug information sheet that tells you of all the side effects and it's you take them or not. The difference is when you're under section, you don't have a choice whether you take those drugs or not.
Yeah. So
those side effects aren't of your choice whether you want to experience them or not. And we know they're not side effects, they're effects. They're just propaganda marketing. And it's one of my pet hates. So I'm very much now somebody that follows natural treatments and would recommend that a lot of people consider those. The second point with regards to being sectioned, it is absolutely an alien environment. You walk through those doors, the doors are locked behind you, you are left while they deal with the paperwork. I was on a ward with 19 other patients. You've got to go in there and suddenly judge for yourself which ones you can talk to, which ones you've got to stay clear from. You've got to get used to your room, you've got to get used to the regime, you've got to get used to the checks. For example, at night time, you checked every hour on the hour. They put the lights on, they check to see if you're awake, you're still alive and breathing, rather. The water system's controlled to have a shower. The drug systems, morning, afternoon, evening. Your meal times are controlled. You're not allowed off the ward. You have a small courtyard to go out there if you smoke. Another courtyard to wander around in with garden area. And you're in there just to take the tablets. The staff are pushed. They're short-staffed. They don't have much time to sit and talk to you. And again, when they do sit and talk to you, they're there to gain information to see whether the meds are working or not, in their opinion, which is fed back to the psychiatrist. So it's another trauma on top of whatever it is you're dealing with when you go in there as a patient. So I would say it is definitely something that affects you psychologically regards recovery. And I would think for a lot of people, the section and being in hospital is a worse trauma than dealing with what they had to start with. That's my personal opinion.
I remember, Daisy, one day when they got your medication and all of a sudden in your little pot there's 2 extra tablets. And you quite rightly said, what's that? Oh, we'll just take it. No, yeah. I want to know what it is. No, it's on your script sheet, so just take it.
Yeah, unfortunately, you need to keep your wits about you, and I would refuse to accept any drug initially that was just in a pot. I requested that they went and brought the medication with the box and took it out in front of me, and they noted that as well.
You're being difficult, I think,
as me being unreasonable. But again, there are a lot of patients that would just take it and not question and it depends on people's backgrounds, people's experiences, what they know from their life experiences. As some will totally believe in the medical system and the mental health system and not question it, not question authority. But those that are awake, and everybody wakes up from some circumstance that sort of leads to a mass unveiling of societal systems of social engineering, control, government, big banking systems and the pharmaceutical industries and your enslavement in society and your birth certificate, you name it, we've got all of those that we talk about, well, you talk about on your shows. It's hard to get your head round, but when you do that, it gives you an empowerment to actually challenge the systems that you're supposed to comply to.
Daisy, we're now at the point where we've told everybody what happened sort of up to 12 months ago.
Which just took 51 minutes, so it looks like you're stopping up for second hour, don't it, Daisy?
Who's counting?
Yeah.
So take us through the last 12 months since you got out. What's happened to you? What's going on? How are you? Because that's really what everybody wants to know. Anybody who's listened to that first show that we did, I mean, I wasn't even in there. Well, I was. I spent hours and days and months, it felt like, in there.
Both of you.
It felt like I was in there as much as you. But
they only serve you decaffeinated coffee in a heated flask on the ward. You can't have caffeine, so bringing me in proper frothy coffee was.
I can remember taking in the coffee machine, if you remember.
Yes, you did. You did. You brought a coffee machine in to make me proper coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, and the day when I walked in there with the dog, and they said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm taking Daisy into the garden with the dog."
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like nobody had ever actually done anything human for anybody in there. They were just supposed to be a machine. So tell us what's happened to Daisy in the past year, and what sort of stage you're at now, and what other things have you been involved with?
I left Sheffield and wanted to get away from the mental health team there, and moved up with my parents to try and recover. And pretty much for the first half of the year, I was very quiet, kept very much to myself, but ended up having a very good CPN, community psychiatric nurse, who is very much more open-minded, very much more understanding, very supportive. And I see the CPN once a week, and that CPN keeps me out of the claws of the psychiatrist because I'm totally phobic of them now. I do not wish to engage with psychiatrists whatsoever. I have found the last couple to be extremely egotistical, very closed shop, so I avoid them. And I have had a good couple of friends near me that I've made friends with who have got me out, got me going to supermarkets and doing basic everyday things and trying to build up my confidence. I've also, while I was actually under section in 2016, December 2016, they refused to give me my section papers, and I wasn't happy about that, and ended up putting a Data Protection Act request in when I was on the ward. And believe it or not, while I was on the ward and I submitted that request to see my mental health records, that request went walkabout. And it wasn't until the end of December when I got out and requested where was my information that it became apparent that it had got lost. And I eventually got my records end of January, end of February, and spent some time periodically trying to cope with reading them to sort of digest why I'd been in, understanding their regimes, seeing if I agreed with them or didn't. And it became very apparent that some of the records were missing. And since then, I've been in a battle to actually gain those from the trust. And it's took a year to try and get these documents, and I'm still waiting. So I knew quite a bit about Data Protection Act before, but I've certainly learned a lot more now. And what I would like to say to people who are wanting to gain their records, whether it be hospital records, accident and emergency records, GP records, court records, police records, whatever, is don't be afraid to use the Data Protection Act to get those, to find out the records about you, what's held about you, for whatever personal reasons you may be needing them for. So I've been engaging with that, and I've also I was well aware of fracking before the sort of life's experiences that I've been subject to, and got involved with an area where I live with people who are opposing fracking, and have been involved on and off on the front line with activists in that regard to try and protect the land, the environment, the water systems and the air, and have found that a worthy cause to be around people who I can trust. I haven't been able to even contemplate returning to the workplace because my PTSD yo-yos, and I have to manage my life accordingly to that.
Well, Bex, stuff. I wish I could stop
Daisy,
calling you by your Daisy. Listen, we're up at the first hour tonight, so we've done the first hour. I just want to have a quick break. It's usually at this time we have. I know that's what Andy says, and I never say that, but we've got lots and lots of stuff going on in the chat room, on Facebook. We've got people asking questions, and so we've got plenty of... Oh, Jesus Christ, this is what happens. You get your own studio, you're all set up and you're producing for yourself, and then what happens is you've got Facebook Live there, you've got the broadcast computer there. In fact, I'll show you on... If anyone's watching on Facebook, this is what crap I have
what
to...
Jason's trying to say is it's much easier if you've got Andy Young producing for you, sticking stuff in the Skype chat for you.
That's right, yeah. But we've had lots and lots of comments, and I'd just like to also say that we've had quite a few comments from Toddy, and Toddy has agreed. Toddy's a good friend. He's a friend of the show, friend of Raconteurs News. Toddy is also having a very bad time with the NHS. We're going to get into that. He's going to be coming on tomorrow night, so there will be a show tomorrow night 7 till 9 here on Raconteurs News. It's going to be again around the same issues, the NHS, but from a different perspective. We're getting the perspective tonight from somebody who was providing care, and we're going to get the perspective tomorrow night of somebody who's receiving care. So Toddy will be on from 7 till 9. We've had lots and lots of... We've got loads of people in the chat room posting things. I just can't keep up with it. It's just well, it's just overwhelming at the moment. What a great show. But you're going to stick around for the second hour, aren't you, Daisy?
Absolutely, because what I want to talk to you guys about is the attempted section in 2014 was most interesting because I ended up putting common law notices up, which caused the AMPs a nightmare. So I think that'd be quite interesting to talk to people about and tell you the notices that I put up.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember it well. I absolutely remember it well.
I've got the notices with me now, so after the break, if you want, I'll tell you what I put up and what I think worked.
Can I just say a couple of things?
Yeah.
Daisy, you said you left Sheffield to sort of get away from blah, blah. The other thing that I know you wanted to get away from was the constant reminder that there was a beautiful 4-bedroom house that you lost because of all of this. And it wasn't because of your mental health that you lost it. It was because of you being a whistleblower and your PTSD, and then how they targeted you, which is why they lost it.
A lot of whistleblowers.
We can get into that in this. We can get into that in the second hour. We can completely do that in the second hour.
And the other thing is, I'd just like Daisy to tell us as well in the beginning of the second hour how she came to be getting injured by men with pointy hats.
Oh yes, I'll tell you about that one.
Okay, well we'll look forward to that one. Listen, we've sold out a bit here at Raconteurs News, so I'm going to play 2 records. First of all, I'm going to play 2 records. The second record that you'll hear is is a song. Not many people have had songs written about them, but I have, and I've never let this go. But this is Heath, who wrote a song about me. So I would not listen to that. I'd probably turn the radio down when that comes on if you're offended by anal sex. But also the other announcement I've got to make as well is that we've sold out a little bit. We've started doing adverts. So before the songs and after the song, there will be an advert. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Couple of songs, couple of adverts. Here's the first one.
It's grand to find a comfortable chair when you're getting on a bit or you've got arthritis. My niece got this from Shackleton's, you know. Shackleton's original high seat. Never thought it'd be so easy to get in and out of. First she sent for their brochure, then went to the showrooms. They'd over 100 chairs to choose from. Shackleton's high seat chair, it's lovely.
Doing all the work. I know, was that Jason?
Which one?
I remember him.
Jason Stephen
Oh,
O.
yeah, you sang around with
long
Potty.
hair and that. Used to live down North
Yeah,
End.
yeah. Used to play Subbuteo with Bullman and
Oh, Jason,
Yeah, that's it.
why did you have to shag Boswell?
You did what?
Why did you have to shag Boswell?
Bastard.
Shag her up the ass.
Did the finger her and all?
Oh,
The
Jason,
fingered Boswell.
you should have never shagged Boswell.
I'm just trying to get to a sister, I bet.
Should have never shagged
Oh,
Boswell.
Penny.
Shagged her up the
Anyway, come on, let's
ass.
sing this Rete song.
Yeah, let's do this.
Oh, Jason, don't you ever shag Boswell. Don't you ever shag Boswell. Shag her up the ass.
Come on, everybody join in.
Oh, Jason, why did you have to shag Boswell? Why did you have to shag Boswell? Shag her up the ass.
Come on, Mum, join in.
Oh, Jason,
Nice singing, Mum.
don't you ever shag Boswell. Don't you ever shag Boswell. Shag her up the
Come on,
ass.
cats, come on. Let's hear you singing.
Oh, Jason, you should have never shagged Boswell. You should have never shagged Boswell. Shag her up the ass.
Come on, the Queen and put Shaw's.
Oh, Jason,
That should have never shagged Boswell.
I should never have done it, mate.
That should have never shagged Boswell.
Bad move.
Shag her up the shit.
You fucking dirty bastard.
What a great idea. A shoe built on blocks. I'll call them blocker boots. We'll sell 1 million.
Blockers, blockers, block, block, blockers, they're in fashion today. Blocker boots are neat, they go with your feet.
Blocker boots are so high, they've made 1 million people buy.
Blockers, blockers, block, block, blockers, they're in fashion today. They're in your shops now.
They're selling fast.
Buy blockers!
Blocker Boots, welcome back to Raconteurs News this Tuesday evening. I noticed I'm a bit close to the mic, so I'm
Monday.
going to come away from it
Oh,
a little
Monday.
bit. What, sorry?
It's Monday.
Oh, it's Monday, yeah, of course it is, yeah. Jeez, this
You're
is your
used to
fault,
saying
see, for
Tuesday,
inventing
mate,
a
aren't you?
Monday show. Oh dear. So, hey, welcome back to Raconteurs News. Just a couple of things that I just want to mention. We've got on the 8th of January, that's when we're coming back. We're doing a show tomorrow night, and then we're going to take Christmas week off. But we'll be back on the... I'm hoping to do a show on the 2nd of January. Hopefully. But if not, Monday the 8th of January is penciled in, and we've got the King... This is incredible. For me, this is incredible. We have got the King and Queen, and these are verifiably King and Queen of the sovereign state of Good Hope. And that is a sovereign state, and it's going to be a sovereign state. It's the story of South Africa. If you don't know this real story of South Africa, just go back to my interview with Karen Smith in Texas, who's a South African activist. Just have a listen to that. If you think you know South African history, then you don't. And there are blacks, there are whites, and then there are what they call coloureds. Now, the coloureds are the people that were actually the indigenous race of South Africa. And I've got the King and Queen of that, and all the... coming on the show on the 8th of January. It's going to be incredible. So you seriously don't want to miss that. And also, what else did I want to mention? Oh, yeah, we've got a problem in chat room. My chat room just keeps going off. Like, you know, it don't matter. Just don't really matter. Just goes off. If I hadn't just for 5 minutes. I think we need to sort that out. Chat room problems. But that probably should have been something I said in private with Andy, but sorry about that. Anyway, we're back with Aid and Daisy. Daisy, how you doing?
I'm still here.
Did you have a good comfort break?
I did, thank you very much.
And Aid, how are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm here. I've now got a full cup of tea again.
All right. Well, we've got on the line with us. We've got Aid, who is he's a radio host. He's took a bit of a sabbatical. I think he's gone a bit Paul McCartney or something on himself, like. But yeah, he's on a bit of a sabbatical. But he's a very, very good friend of mine. And of course, we've got Daisy, who is the NHS surgeon whistleblower, who has had the mental health system poured on her, essentially. So, Aid, where do you want to take it from here?
Well, we'd got to the point where we knew where Daisy had got to sort of up to 12 months ago, walking out of there, managed to spend Christmas with, well, kind of a combination of me and a family and whatever, and then sort of moving on from there. And what Daisy had said was that fracking was something that, well, it's not just recently. I mean, Daisy's sort of been into that for a long time, I know that. And she did have one particular experience that we spoke about at length. Daisy, do you want to give us some detail about what, where, how, and what happened to you?
I think one of the biggest problems that people opposing fracking are facing is increasing police presence, who are basically corporate facilitators of the fracking industry. Those that are trying to exercise their lawful rights to peaceful protest and peaceful direct action are facing increasing opposition by huge numbers of police, which is disproportionate to the set of circumstances. I've been present at a fracking well pad site where there's only been 20 of us there, and we've had 70 police turn up. They are becoming well trained and well versed with shall we say, increasing strategies that appear to be very military-esque. They tend to arrive in multiple police support units. They line up like the military do, and they come and quite often forcibly remove us from areas under various pieces of legislation. They are not there to act as constables, to be peacekeepers. They are facilitating business for the corporations, fracking corporations with the government, and it's an issue that is not getting widespread mainstream media, which is typical. They're not wanting the public to become aware of the risks with fracking, and nor are they wanting public mainstream media attention with regards to the increasing degrees of police brutality towards peaceful protesters. This is happening over at Lancashire, at Kirby, at Preston New Road, has been for a long time, and is now happening at Kirby Misperton in North Yorkshire. And it was earlier this year whereby they were trying to move 200 of us, 200 of peaceful protesters who were snapped down, and they were the police were trying to execute their legal power under the Labour and Trade Unions Act, and were failing to disclose the subsection on which they were trying to enforce their authority to remove us. So, in effect, what I believe is they ended up removing 200 of us without legal authority, let alone common law grounds, and as a result of that, I suffered an injury which resulted in me being out of action for 3 months. And there are increasing numbers of other peaceful, law-abiding human beings who are suffering different types of injury as well. And unfortunately, this state of play now is, unless you have recording equipment on you, i.e. a body camera, to safeguard you, you can be at the mercy of increasing police brutality, which is disproportionate to the set of circumstances that we're in. So it's a sad state of affairs in this day and age to have the government and the fracking corporations and the police working together to suppress human beings' rights to peaceful protest, and disproportionately and without, in a lot of cases, legal or lawful authority, executing force against the public with increasing injuries and sets of circumstances that are not very nice, to say the least, to endure.
So that's part of what you've been involved in the past year. Now, I know you've got some ongoing legal and lawful things that are going on in your life at the moment, which you can't really talk about. But what can you tell us that would help other people there, Daisy?
I would strongly say to anybody who doesn't know anything about what fracking is to research it, find out if fracking is occurring in your local community, find out what the licensing agreements are with the government and the fracking industry, and join a local group and become informed and find out what the risks are to your health, your family, your children, your environment, the water supply, the farming industry, and step up and become awake to a very, very imminent and dangerous situation that could be right on your doorstep.
I'm going to try and put this question very, very subtly and hope that you grasp onto it, Daisy. There are certain legal things that you're going through at the moment with regard to your previous encounters with the mental health system. Is there anything that you can go over with us at the moment? Anything that might help anybody else?
I think with regards to anybody, what with mental health legislation and things like that.
Yeah, not only that, it's this sort of process of you finding out, what exactly happened to you a year ago, in legal terms, has not been an easy thing for you to get hold of any information. And I know that's an ongoing process, and I know some of it you can't talk about. Is there anything that you can talk about with regard to that? Because
I would say that anybody that is subject or is under the mental health services or is at risk of being sectioned or is sectioned, the whole process is extremely traumatizing. You may feel that there were things that weren't done correctly, and if you feel that that is the case with yourself, then I strongly advise you to become well informed about what your rights are and how you can find out what was correct and what may not be correct. And with that, you want to learn about the Data Protection Act, which is something that is available to every single member of the public, whereby through that act you can gain access to all of your records. One of the problems with that is that when you are provided with your records, you may not have all of your records given to you, and you may have to fight for records that they are withholding from you. People get quite scared about legislation, which is the legal route, but unfortunately we are surrounded by a system of admiralty law, so sometimes you have to work within that system. And looking at the legislation, it's not hard to do. It's not hard to look up policies that are under the trust that you are a service user of, become familiar with that process, and look up the Information Commissioner's Office, find out templates of how you can access your records. If anybody has any difficulty, I can provide information to you to help them, and to gain your records first and foremost. If you do have a complaint, then use the complaint system, look up the trust websites, find the correct policies, read them, digest them, submit your complaints. Don't be frightened to ask questions, and have meetings and take things forward as you see fit. One of the particular issues that I think happens to a lot of people who are subject to mental health entertainment is where the police are involved. There are lots of different parts of the Act, and depending on your set of circumstances, depends on what part of the Act they may wish to execute. I was tried once in 2014 under the Section 2 detention, and when AMPs, that's approved mental health professionals, when social workers come out to be involved in the assessment, they may or may not bring coppers. Believe you me, if you are looking out your window at home and you're finding social workers, doctors and police on your doorstep, it is a very frightening experience. And I just want people to be aware that for police to turn up, there does have to be a risk assessment done, which is called a rave assessment, which is one acronym that can be used. But a rave assessment is a risk on the health and safety of people coming out to assess you, and the risk of you for resisting aggression, violence and escape. And police can't come out unless there is that risk assessment done. And sometimes members of the public might find out that that hasn't been done, and the presence of police was not required. And it is something that people should inquire about if policies were correctly followed.
Daisy, it appears to me, right, we do need some sort of mental health legislation, don't we?
Yes.
It's just that it seems to me that this is not preventative or even responsive. It's open to be abused, and that is what they've been doing with you. And as a result of that, you've suffered the symptoms of somebody who has actually got mental health issues. Whereas,
yeah, I mean,
if you'd been left alone, it seems the system is just in place that it responds to it can respond to things, but it also can be used as a weapon.
It can indeed. And for people who aren't aware of the correct process with that act, is if you get police turning up, and a lot of people will think, oh crikey, I've got to open the door. Well, you don't. There's a section, what you call a section 136, where police can be asked to attend for mental health assessments at your home at the request of the social worker, which is known as an AMP, approved mental health professional. But they can only bring the police to your door if they believe there is a serious risk. I had 2 police officers turn up trying to coax me out of my house to get me to step onto the public path. And I was very clear and very vocal in speaking to the police by phone to saying, you don't have jurisdiction here. I asked the policemen to identify themselves with the collar numbers 10 times, and they failed to. And despite explaining that they were on their Queen's oath of office and had to declare themselves to me, they didn't.
And anyone listening, folks, right? This is not just Daisy telling this story. Myself and Aid both witnessed it firsthand. We were both there when they were trying to do this. So when you're listening to this, when you're hearing this, this is not Daisy telling us a second-hand story. It's not her making something. This actually happened. I saw it with my own eyes, and I know you did.
I haven't got a vendetta against the NHS in any way. If it wasn't for those people, I wouldn't have any legs. All we're trying to do tonight is let Daisy explain to people, it could be you next. And if it does, this is what you've got to look forward to.
And with a 136, an AMP is requesting police presence, but has to do so where there is a justified risk assessment. And if there isn't one, they have no grounds for asking the police to be there. As a patient and as a service user, if you see the police there, a lot of people will be absolutely terrified.
Because we're all taught to be scared of a uniform from the age of 3 when you first go to nursery school.
Exactly. You're not taught about the legal system, deliberately in the education system. It's done to make you comply and not question, etc. But what the police were trying to do, and if anybody has that, is they will try to entice you to come out of the house, to step onto a public path, not on your driveway. They'll want you off your driveway, they'll want you on the path. And then they can lynch you under a 136 in a public place, and bundle you off then to force you to be subject to a mental health assessment and get you into hospital. You do not have to open the door to a police officer. And by rights, you have every right to say, ask them what their name is, where they're based, and what their collar number is. Remind them they're under the Queen's Oath, and first and foremost, they're there as a peacekeeper, not a policy officer.
If anybody's listening to this doesn't matter whether you get the police at your door who are stood there with a so-called bailiff who are not, they're just a debt collector, or whether it's for mental health or anything. All you need to say to them is, I accept your oath and I hold you to it.
And with that, I managed to get rid of the police, but not without the threat of the social worker saying, I'm going to come back with a warrant. And the thing is, when you get that repeatedly said, any service user that's going to hear through their letterbox that they're coming back with a warrant is going to run away. There is, majority of people are going to do that, and that's exactly what I did. And you were there. You went away. And as a result, I was kept away from my home for fear of a warrant. And what I want to say to people who are subject to a mental health act assessment, once that recommendation goes in from a psychiatrist or any other source, because there are other routes to having a mental health act assessment, is the social a duty bound to execute that assessment. And if they can't get hold of you, for example, like me, where they threaten me with a warrant, they can then go for a warrant, and that is known as a Section 135. And once they get hold of a warrant, which means they go to magistrate's court and they ask for social worker asks for a warrant, the police and the social workers then try to execute that warrant, which means that you're either savvy enough to ask the mental health services, have you got a warrant there, or have you not? And you may find that they'll either be truthful with you, or they will lie through their teeth and tell you they haven't when they have. And they will try to basically come and check on your house day and night to try and execute that warrant. And that will mean that the police officer has the right to break down the door and get in if they so wish to execute this warrant. And that is a terrible thought for a lot of people who have mental health difficulties and are then fleeing from their homes of fear of being collared for being put into hospital. What I want to say...
Sorry, I've got a question for you, Bex. Right, when did this all start? When did it all kick off? Just the year. Just give me the year.
I was a blue November 2010.
Right. Right. Okay. 2010. Right.
And then.
So what? I'm assuming just if you told the 2008 Daisy what was going to happen to her, or gave her this scenario, what would you think the advice that the 2008 Daisy would give the 2010 Daisy, and how do you think that if somebody told you back then what was going to happen, how would you think you'd reacted?
I would say, and I've always said ever since, and quite a lot of other whistleblowers will say the same, is do not ever blow the whistle. Because once you've done that, your career is over. I know of a lot of people. I know of one person who died of a heart attack as a result of blowing the whistle in his 40s. One person who almost lost their marriage. Another person who almost hung themselves. And another person who I helped keep their job. And that wasn't easy.
I'm not in the NHS, never worked for the NHS. I've only ever enjoyed their services after I've had motorbike accidents. And I know another one. And that is just through my social life. I know another one. And she lost everything. House, husband, job, the lot.
Unfortunately...
Oh, and children. It's
an everyday occurrence. And the tragedy of it is the workplace concerns that were raised to protect the public and patients gets completely buried in a concocted system of targeting and character assassination, which goes on for years. The people, they either fight and end up being suspended for a long period of time and then lose their job, or they're sacked instantly and they don't know how to deal with it.
So I suppose my question was, Daisy, was what do you think 2008 Daisy would say to 2010 if 2008 Daisy had gone to 2017 and seen all this stuff that's gone off, and then could go back in time to 2010 Daisy? What do you think? What advice would she give her?
It would have been to keep my mouth shut.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there are people in the NHS which I'm sure do exactly that. Because, like everybody else, with this system of social engineering, we are slaves. They have us entrapped from cradle to grave. You are in a debt-based society. You end up with a mortgage. You have to have food on your table, roof over your head, or rented accommodation, whatever. And you need that income.
But wouldn't you think that, the knowledge you've gained since this happened, do you think that outweighs, the detriment that it's caused you? The knowledge you've gained? I mean, you're hugely knowledgeable, which you probably weren't beforehand, on common law and all these different things and the ways to protect yourself. So, it's a lot better that way. Do you not think? How does that weigh up?
Indeed, I hear exactly what you're saying. There are swings and roundabouts, there are ups and downs on it. The lessons I've learned, the chapters in my life's book, I don't regret at this point in time. Other days I do, because I've had my illusion of freedom, shall I say, curtailed in a way that I never would have anticipated. My training, my dedication, my career, my service to the NHS and patients is gone. It will never come back. I've got a long mental health history as a result of that. The chances of me gaining employment in anything is going to be severely restricted. My life completely changed, as does most life circumstances for whistleblowers. On the flip side of that, I would say the level of knowledge I've learned, the awakening process, the revelations of a multitude of societal systems that I've learned, I am very grateful for. And as you guys know, it takes an extreme set of circumstances for that veil to come down for each individual. And that is happening across the board, across the world, to a lot of people under a lot of different circumstances. They are seeing the systems for what they are. And we all talk about this tipping point. At what point will society go no more? Our numbers are increasing for whatever reasons. And so I try and look at it from a spiritual teaching point of view to what I've been through. I do my best to help anybody I can with whatever circumstance, with the lessons I've learned, the knowledge I have, and help apply it to other people. Because the one thing we all hate is to see abuse. And if we can step in and guide that person to understanding the system, how to challenge that accordingly, assert their authority, and assert their rights as an individual human being, I think that's what people like you and I are here to do. And that helps me on a daily basis to say we're all in this together. But some days it's not easy when you've had your so-called independence, your so-called freedom, and your so-called income and your career that you think you've got there forever taken away from you. We all know that for all our different experiences that we've gone through.
Tell us about your fracking.
Right,
Sorry, go on, Ada. You carry on. You go.
I was just going to say, I think Daisy's dead right in virtually everything she says. Even when she was absolutely filled full of drugs, she was still probably the most intelligent person that I've ever met, even at that point in her life.
Oh, thanks, mate.
Yeah, it's all right. No worries. None taken there. But she's dead right, especially with one thing, and that is that I'm going to put it into aid terms. For anybody to wake up, they need to be shat on from the biggest height possible.
They do, yes.
Because what's happening is, and I hate you, well, you know me in cliches, I'm Captain Cliche, but Max Egan, he always says, let's call things what they are.
Yep.
Let's call things out for what they are. And another thing is, because things are done very, very gradually, we're all boiled like frogs. You know, the boiling. If you've got a boiling pan of water and chuck frogs in, they'd all scream. If you put them in a pan of cold water and put a fire under it and let it boil gradually, none of them would scream. And that's what we're like, because I'll use the word they, the authorities, the government, whatever, what they do is they frog boilers. And they dish us a load of shit and say how much of it we'll take. Mm. And then if we take that, they'll dish us a bit more and dish us a bit more and a bit more until we start kicking. And then when we kick, they back off. Good example, the price of petrol. Can you remember the uproar there was when it went over £1 a litre? So they backed it off a little bit to 98 point something a litre. And what is it today?
Well, you know what they did, though, didn't you? Don't you? They started the Iraq War. That's what got it.
Yeah, you know.
That's why they're just idiots.
The thing is, once you find out there's a problem with one layer, it's like an onion. It then reveals the next layer, the next layer, the next layer, and you suddenly have this rabbit hole of connections that makes you realise that from the moment you're born, the systems that are in place to enslave you from cradle to grave are hidden in plain sight, and the wealth of information that is out there for you to wake up to that on the net is there. You've just got to have that key moment of going, something is not right, and then you start to see it for what it is. And it's the Wizard of Oz. It's the man behind the curtain, and you suddenly have a huge awakening, and it's a shock to your system to realise that you've been lied to, you're controlled, you're enslaved. The systems are there with the legal system to control you. It's a ping-pong court for the legal system for them to make money. And, you know, it's one thing after another. And it is very difficult to assimilate that. You either go into this cognitive dissonance of, I don't want to go there because that will fracture my reality, or you have that revelation of going, I've got to know this. And
well, that's why I'm single.
See it. You can't go back. It's the red and the blue pill in the Matrix. You can't go back. You can't awaken yourself. So you have to adapt to it, grow from it, learn from it, and the best way of dealing with it is to help others. And it's I think one of the biggest lessons in life to recognise.
But helping others in a subtle way, that's the way to do it, innit? It's
you can't
because
go
if you
on.
just go banging in there and just go, listen, this is crap, that's crap, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. It's the subtlety and the delivery that's the key of it all, isn't it?
Yeah. Just sowing that seed to make them question. Too much, they shut down. You just got to slowly do that, and it's very frustrating for us to try and do that because you just want to go, wake up. It's this, and this, and
listen. Aid wants to make a point here.
Well, I've got quite a lot. And
when we talk about casting seeds, it took me about 6 months with Aid, but then he got it. But go on, Aid.
What happened once I got it? I was off like a train, wasn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, you either hook onto it or you don't.
Well, you know. I've got quite a bit I want to say on this, if we don't mind. Firstly, this is the reason why I'm single. My ex, who I dearly love to bits, and she knows this, she was one of the ones I can't deal with that. It will destroy my reality on life, so I can't. I was the exact opposite. What do you mean I've been lied to? How on earth could so few people manage to control the world? I want to do whatever I can about this, and I want to know whatever I can about this. And then a short time after that, you know, I'm single again, and I guess that's life, and that's, you know, the future's always evolving, isn't it? But one thing I always remember was, and I've heard Jason say it a number of times, is that let's say general public, the people who don't know the stuff that we do or choose to ignore it, Jason's often referenced them as being in an childlike or adolescent mind.
Yeah,
Now-
it's my that's my pet theory.
Yeah, you see, when I sort of always started to look at this stuff, as you know, my background was in finance, and the biggest thing that I could not forgive myself for was in the 18 or 19 years I spent as a financial advisor. At no point did anybody ever tell me about fractional reserve lending, and that still to this day does not happen in that training. Okay. So
That's with the education system, isn't it, in not telling you about legal and law and who you are and your birth certificate.
The thing, we're all taught that, where money comes from, or we're allowed to assume where money comes from. And for that reason, I always believed that was what was at the centre, and that's what joined all the dots up about, any subject that people like us discover. But I've now got a different thought. And it did come from what Jason said about people being in a child or an adolescent mind. And what I think it's the word safe. People like to believe that they are safe. So people don't want to be free. They want somebody else to have the responsibility of making them safe. So, again, another one of Jason's, they're happy that somebody else has got that power for them. They're happy to give that power away.
Externalisation of power.
Externalise the power.
It is, but it's also to stop you as a human being questioning, why am I here? What is my purpose? What is my strength? It's to stop you thinking out the box.
This is what I think is at the centre of it. Okay, people don't want to be safe. People don't want to be free, because with that freedom comes a huge amount of responsibility. People want to feel safe, but then they'll sit and watch the news, be fed a total bunch of lies, which are all designed to make them feel unsafe, to give them a need for Big Daddy.
Yeah.
And I don't mean Big Brother, I mean Daddy to look after them, because they're in a childlike state.
Yeah.
And my view now is that people have always asked me, or often asked, well, how do we get rid of all this? What have we got to do? What have we got to do to put things right, to stop the 1%? And you've heard me say a few times, ignore them out of existence. Because the one thing, if you go do anything, if you want to buy a carpet, you go to a carpet shop. If you can find the wholesaler, you'll get it cheaper. Okay? So it's cut out the middleman. Now, the government in any country create and provide, they create nothing. Everything they supposedly give, say benefits, they have to steal from somebody else in the first place. Now, my view is, and if anybody's not read this book, I absolutely go and read it, or go on YouTube. There's actually a very cost-effective, that's free, audio version of this book. And it's Lark and Rose, the most dangerous superstition. And the most dangerous superstition is government. It absolutely is government. Because every authority, like the mental health system, the police, or what, they all come from one place, and they all try and gain this so-called authority from one place, and that's government. And it's us that legitimizes it, and it's us that gives it its strength. And I'm going to give you an example. The electoral register. What they do, they'll write to the occupier. Well, firstly, an occupier, it's a term of war. Occupied France, occupied Europe, the occupied territories. So they write to you as the occupier. Also, so it's not properly addressed. So that's mail fraud number one. Mail fraud number two is they put on the outside of the envelope the return address of a PO box, which is not a proper place of business. So that's mail fraud number two. Now, inside this envelope is a form that you're supposed to fill in. And you're asked to write in it block letters, capital letters, okay, and sign it on the bottom. So, but then the envelope that they give you to send it back in is addressed to a proper address, a proper office, a proper place of business. So what they're actually doing is they're getting you to ask for the contract with them. It's not them asking you for the contract to pay your council tax or to be on their register. It's they very craftily get you to fill in the form and ask for the contract yourself. So my answer is, stop bloody asking.
Absolutely, but the thing is, what most people, I mean, I found it fascinating when you discussed the Postmaster General and the issue of occupier and PO boxes. That was another aha moment for me to add to the collection of many others. But as we know, it boils down to contract law. And when people actually understand what that is and grasp the concepts of that, that's what everything is based on, and that's how they trick and trap you in all sorts of parts of society. And you mentioned there a reference book, didn't you? I think, did you? Or a name, Lark and Rose. That was it.
Oh, Lark and Rose, the most dangerous superstition. Yeah.
Yeah.
And can I just say, the most dangerous superstition is one word: government.
Yes, and we know what government stands for. If you actually look at the word govern and ment. Ment means mental, mind. It means mind governing. You are, by your vote, accepting to be mind governed by a group of people without even questioning what it's all about. Another person that's very good I discovered recently is somebody called David Robinson, and if you look it up on Amazon, he's got some amazing books. One's called Commercial Law Applied, Learn to Play the Game. The second one is Be the One to Execute Your Trust, which we all know about trust law, which is very interesting and really important to know about. And the other one is Commercial Freedom and Release, Hardcore Redemption in Law. Absolutely brilliant books. He's an American guy, but a lot of it applies to us. Really easy reading. And as we know, we've got our very own Veronica Chapman, haven't we? And her book is Freedom is More Than Just a 7-Letter Word. So for anybody out there who's sort of wanting to understand where we're coming from, those books, particularly Veronica Chapman, who's also on YouTube, as we know, is a great basic to start to understand what we're trying to say to people out there. So what you're saying about occupier was absolutely spot on. It's really, really important to understand what you're getting through your letterbox and how you can...
I'll just go through briefly what happened when the lady came from the electoral register just a few weeks ago. I think on her third visit, I actually opened the door. I don't know why, but I did. And she said, electoral register. And I said, shopping list. And she looked at me. I said, I'm sorry, I thought we were playing a word association game. What do you want? She said, you need to fill that in, and tried to give me this envelope. And of course, I didn't take it off her. I said, what's that? She said, oh, we've written to you 3 times. And I went, nobody's written to me. Who have you written to? She said, you. I said, well, who do you think I am? She said, the occupier. I said, I'm not an occupier. I'm an inhabitant.
I'm not Israel.
Yeah. I'm an inhabitant. And she sort of looked at me, and I said, the trouble is they send you out to do your job, and they don't tell you the background behind it. I said, so how can I help you? She says, well, you've got to fill that form in. I went, oh, have I? Who says that? She says, well, they'll take you to court. I said, who are they going to take you to court? I said, and why would they do that? She says, well, they'll fine you £1,000. I said, who are they going to take to court? She said, you. I said, well, who am I? She said, I don't know. I said, exactly, bye, and just shut the door. Now, I did exactly the same last year. Oh, they didn't take me to court last year, and I don't expect them to take me to court this year. But so what I'm saying is, when people say to me, yeah, but what can we do about it? There's all these problems in the world, and we need to do something about it. What can we do? My answer is, stop asking for things, because the only things that cause you crap are the things that you ask for.
Yeah, invitation.
So recognise when you get a letter through the door, what's actually on it, and study it and realise what it actually is, and what, if any, responsibility have you got to actually even accept it or fill it in. And 9 out of 10 times, it's nothing. You haven't got a responsibility to fill it in.
Is to read what's in plain sight and to understand the etymology of those words. Because people just see it as something official and immediately fret and panic and think it's authority when actually a lot of the time it's trickery of words.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to be closing soon. I just wanted to mention that regards police coming to your door regards Mental Health Act assessments, one thing that I'm working on at the moment that's under investigation is back in 2014, just regards common law and legal, is when you guys came to help get me away for fear of a warrant, the notices that I put up on my property were very interesting. We put up a police oath attestation notice, which was a Section 83 of the Police Reform Act, and completed that and put that up. The second notice that I put up was a cease and desist entry notice of any persons attempting unconsented entry. And the third one was a trespass notice in accordance with the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act, the Criminal Damage Act and tort law. And what happened with that, what I suspect happened with that, and that's what is under investigation at the moment, and I'll update you at a later time, is that, I think, scared the crap out of the social workers. And therefore, they didn't, once they saw the notices when they tried to come back for a second time, they didn't bother after. And what I think they then did was they went for a warrant, and that warrant wasn't executed. And so what I'm saying to people is you can, if you think cleverly and with regards to your rightful authority, put the right notices up and safeguard your home, your castle and yourself from acts of legislation to do with the Mental Health Act being carried out and you potentially being put into hospital. So what I would suggest is anybody who's in that arena is have a look at that sort of information and try it out for yourself. And at the moment, I'm investigating what actually happened to do with my notices, because I honestly do believe that positioning those notices safeguarded me at that time.
One thing I've learned quite quickly is there are no gold medals or certificates. I've been helping a friend recently with so-called bailiffs who are just cockeyed debt collectors. And I said to him, look, there are no gold medals or certificates. He said, what do you mean? I said, nobody's going to write to you and say, okay, you've won. All that's going to happen is they will stop. And the fact that you don't know that they've stopped, but they have, it's just as time goes by, less and less and less bad things will happen to you. Because as soon as you stand up, put a notice up, whether it's the removal of implied right of access, whether you tell a debt collector that is trespassing, and then it's aggravated trespass, and then it's criminal trespass. You know, I mean, I know I've spoke before about when I threatened to arrest 2 coppers and a debt collector or bailiff or whatever. They all buggered off, and I was only on the phone. You know, because once you have actually said stuff that they know to be right, they now know, a lot of them, especially the coppers, they're getting to know that they can't hide behind a badge or a uniform. It's them as a man or a woman, as a human being, that you are going to take to court and you are going to get a commercial lien against their property. And I tell you what, once I told that copper that, he could not get his ass off that driveway quick enough.
Yeah, and it's the same thing as we know with the council tax, the unlawful administrative hearings. You know, challenging them, going in and asserting your authority, gaining jurisdiction of that court, and they don't know what to do. So,
I mean, you walk into that, well, and they say, could you state your name to the court? And you say what you think is your name. You've done 3 things. Firstly, you've given them joinder. Secondly, you've accepted that it's a court. And thirdly, you've just committed perjury because you've lied because it's not your name. It's Crown copyright. So anything you say or do after that point, you're guilty anyway. And all you've done is said 2 words, your first and your second name. That's it. You know, and people have got to get into what it actually means when they ask, you know, the other one, driving your car. Are you the driver of this vehicle, sir? He's not asking you if you're operating the pedals and the steering wheel. He's asking you, are you sat in that vehicle, not a car, for commercial purposes? And if the answer's yes, you then need tax, test, insurance, and, and a fine, sir. We'll give you one of those as well while we're at it. And people have got to get to know this. I've quickly realised that I'm an anarchist. And that doesn't mean I want to throw petrol bombs in the street. Another word for it is voluntarist, for everybody to act voluntarily between each other. You know, and I get people who say to me, well, but what happens if we don't have a government? You know, who'll build the roads? Who'll do whatever? Well, I ain't got all the answers, but I do know one thing. There'll be 7 billion people, all with much better answers and questions than the shithouse governments have got.
Well, I think that's a great point to end on. We've run out of time. I've got to say that we've run out of time. Here on Raconteurs News, thank you very much to Daisy for joining us, and also Aid. Well, you're looking a bit like Rick Moranis. I've got to say that. I can't let it go. Listen, everybody, thank you very much for tuning into Raconteurs News tonight. Thank you to Daisy. Thank you to Adi. We've got Toddy on tomorrow night. Big thank you as well to Super Leeds for reminding me that we need to support Jeremy Bamber, the Jeremy Bamber campaign. I just want to keep Jeremy Bamber's name. Keep going. Chip away a little at a time. Jeremy Bamber's campaign. I know that the donation that Super Leeds made to them has made a huge difference. They've been able to do documents. So just little things can... And I'm not saying it's a little thing, Super Leeds, but little things can do something. So... whatever you're doing, as long as it's good and it's good for somebody, listen to us tomorrow night. Toddy's going to be on. And then we're going to book off for Christmas. I'm just a boy from Sheffield. Just, I don't know, doing whatever I do.
We're just chatting and enjoying ourselves.
I smell like coal. Gotta get the wiggies cause I'm off to the hole in the road. I'm wagging off school and I'm off to the city, watching telly all night and I'm not looking pretty. See, I got this job downtown, selling knocked off ladies' watches for £1. For a really dodgy man that I met in a dodgy cafe. You know, he said to me, the girl who sold these yesterday wasn't selling very carefully. Police came along and took her and all my watches away. So if you see some coppers, you grab my stuff and leg it, boy, right away. I'll be in the cafe. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way through life. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way through life. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way. So it's been a few hours and I haven't sold enough for my bus fare home. Street selling's pretty tough, so I turn on the charm for the lunchtime rush with a smile and a wiggle on my schoolboy touch. So the charm is working in the underground. There's a crowd of men and women gather round, and the watches they are going, the money is a flowing. Think I'll take a little extra, stick it in my pocket, spend you later. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way through life. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way through life. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way. I haven't sold a watch for an hour and I'm dying for a slash. I've had enough of this, so I'm off for a piss. Then a quick walk back round to the cafe. Sitting at his table drinking tea, looks at me suspiciously. Then with a glance at the watch he says, how did you do? He paid me a couple of quid, then he said, would you like to come and work another day? I said I'd come back down on Friday, and to that he said okay. So with £2 in my pocket and another 5 in my shoe, I nipped down to Castle Market where a man who looks like Leo Sayer is selling pots with cockles and prawns. Just make me feel like dancing. Then off back to dinner on the Wiggies and then home. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way. I'm just a making his way.